That's a Nanya thing.
All right, Genesis chapter 26 is where we are this evening, and we got down, I believe, before to as far as verse 24. I'm going to go down through the rest of the chapter tonight. You'll recall the earlier half of chapter 26. Isaac was headed toward Egypt because of the famine, and God told him not to go any farther than this Philistine town of Gerar, which he had stayed in for a while, and then he and the Philistines there had some disagreements over wells that had been dug. And so as he finally settles once again in Beersheba, there in verse 23, we see that God now appears to Isaac. So again, we'll pick up actually in verse 23 rather than just 24. So
Did we really get to 24? Because I thought we ended on 13.
Did we?
Yeah, you cut it short.
Yeah, I think you're on 14, not 24.
All right, well, okay.
I don't remember quarreling over wells.
Yeah, I don't remember quarreling over
All
wells
right,
either.
well,
so I, think
I
we
guess
ended on 14.
you put down what I thought we were going to get to instead of how far we
Yeah.
actually did get to.
That's what you wanted to get to. And then you
Okay.
We never get as far as you want to get.
Sometimes you do.
What you talking about, Willis? Okay,
So
well, let's back up. All right, we'll pick up with verse 12 then. I can do that. I'm flexible. All right, well, in verse 12 it says, "Now Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him." Now, you'll recall that the area where this happens is in Philistine territory. Now, he has left his home in Beersheba because of the famine, and as I mentioned earlier, it was his intention to work his way down to Egypt, and he got as far as the near coastal area excuse me, of Gerar, and God told him not to go any farther. Now, as he's allowing his cattle to graze in Philistine territory, the Philistines are all too happy to let him stay there. Now, does anybody recall why they made no effort to run Isaac off?
Because they're afraid of his God.
There you go. They'd already seen that Abraham apparently was protected by God, and they knew Isaac was Abraham's son. So the Philistine king does not want to offend Isaac, so he's willing to let him stay here. But we see that God blesses him in such a way that they start to get a little bit jealous. So verse 13 says, "And the man became rich and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy, for he had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him." Now, the thing we have to kind of wonder about, we already know that Abraham was filthy rich and had all kinds of flocks and herds, and Isaac apparently inherited all of it. So if now we're being told that Isaac is become rich, what happened to all of the flocks and herds of Abraham? Or is this just God's way of saying that Abraham was rich, and now Isaac is absolutely what we would today call
Filthy rich.
filthy rich?
That's what's happening here.
I think so.
That's what they mean by very wealthy.
Yeah.
100-fold is.
What's that?
100-fold is this.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking a lot of cattle. Verse 14 says, "For he had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household." Now at this point, Isaac's got Jacob and Esau. So if he's got a great household, where are all the rest of these people coming from?
Servants.
Got a lot of servants, apparently.
He's basically a nation unto himself.
Apparently. Plus, Rebecca brought several of her own when she came. And we know that if these servants might possibly themselves be having kids, we're potentially looking at a whole house full of servants and slaves that, or employees that are working for him. What else was it that Abraham was known for that Isaac probably learned from his father?
Combat.
Art of warfare. These Hebrew people were known for being exceptional military strategists. Do you think the Philistines are also aware of this possibility? And as Isaac has already inherited all that his dad's got, and now he's got a whole bunch more of his own, do you think the Philistines are thinking that if we hack these people off and they decide to turn on us, they've got the resources and the knowledge to cause us some serious damage?
I told you I watched that series a week or two ago about the House of David,
Uh-huh.
and the whole storyline lead up of the Philistines planning to go to war with the Jews and trying to unite the various Philistine kingdoms together to have enough strength to take on the Jews. And they're basically the Philistine kings are arguing among themselves about what it's going to take to defeat the Jews. And one of them said something about, "We'll have the numbers," and the other one says, "When have numbers ever mattered against the Jews?"
Good point. Yep. All right. Verse 14 says he had a great household so that the Philistines envied him. So now we got the beginnings of some conflict going on here. It says, now all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up by filling them with earth. Well, that was nice of them.
You got to figure that's a pretty extreme measure to take in an arid land where water is a premium, that once a well is dug and you've created a source to access the water, to close it up again, it's like one of the worst things you could possibly ever do.
Which makes me think that maybe they did this just to, that even though the Philistine leadership may have tolerated Isaac and figured we don't want to hack them off, just like a lot of other political situations, what the leadership wanted might not have reflected what the people were thinking.
His neighbors didn't like him.
Yeah. The people figured, we don't want these folks around here. And what better way to get rid of them than making water unavailable? So they stop up the wells. Well, verse 16 says, then Abimelech, now you'll recall, just as a reminder, Abimelech was not his name. That's more than likely the title of the Philistine king. And whether this is Abimelech Sr. or Jr., we just have no way of knowing. But probably, based on the fact that 60 years have elapsed, probably the son of the Abimelech that Abraham encountered. But again, that's just figuring based on the numbers and time. We don't know for sure. But it says, then Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. Once again, there's an allusion to the, they knew they had military expertise. You're too powerful. Not too numerous, too powerful.
Well, it's got God behind him.
Oh, and that. And Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there.
So he didn't go that far then.
Didn't go that
He
far.
went from the town to the valley nearby.
Pretty much. Just went to probably what would have been a slightly more fertile area. And what course do we have in valleys? Water, rivers. So all Isaac did is go to where the water was a little easier to get. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the same names which his father had given them. It's interesting that it was a Hebrew practice to name the wells that they dug. I mean, we would never think twice about digging a well. It's like, oh, well, we got to name it. But that was a common practice for them back then. What's that?
I'm thinking what all the names they had in different areas in the temple and everything. I guess they just.
They named everything.
Yeah, oh yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They named, well, of course, we name buildings a lot of times, but they didn't name just buildings. They would name parts of buildings. I mean, look at we were studying this morning in our Bible study talking about the Jerusalem wall. Every single gate had a name to it. Different parts of the city would
Every
have
tower had a
names.
name.
What's that?
Every tower had a name.
Every tower had a name. When King Solomon's temple was built, the two big pillars that supported the main porch, the one on the left, I believe, was called Boaz, and the one on the pillar on the right was called Jachin. One meant strength, and the other meant plenty. So they named everything. A cultural issue here. Not really something that we need to look for a lot of theological meaning. It was a cultural thing for them.
Well, if you have a number of wells, you want to have a way to identify them.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you? And
When you're talking
That's
about it,
what the
which
gates
well did you
were.
go to? The well over there by, have a
And
name,
that's true too as far as the wells. It would be an easy way to identify which one you're like. Well, where'd Isaac go? Well, he's down at. So yeah, that is true. It would help identify locations.
yeah, the gate's the same thing. Which gate is which gate is which
Mm-hmm.
gate.
All right, but anyway, it says verse 19 says, when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water. The actual, now this is interesting because you could find some theological meaning in this. The Hebrew word that in my Bible is translated flowing water is the same word that also sometimes is translated as the well of living water. And where have we heard that before?
Gee, I wonder.
What's that?
Just in Garden of Eden in the
Mm-hmm.
new temple.
The herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, the water is ours. So he named the well Essek, because they contended with him. And of course, Essek simply means contention. Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over it too. So he named it Sitnah, which means enmity, or,
Mine says
Yeah.
hostility.
hostility, enmity, two synonyms for the same word. And he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he named it Rehoboth, which that means large or broad spaces. So apparently with each digging of each one of these wells, Isaac kept moving farther to the north and east, back towards the direction of Beersheba, little at a time, until finally he gets far enough that the Philistines figure, okay, you're out of our territory, and they stop following him. Because with each movement, even though Abimelech, the Philistine leadership, had basically said, you're welcome to stay here, the Philistine people that lived in the area kept trying to push them out.
Well, the reason that they didn't name that well is because it would have been Philistine blood.
It would have been a what?
Philistine blood.
Which one are we talking about?
one
The
that they-
last one?
Yeah. The Philistines left because they found out that it was going to be named Philistine blood. Never mind. Too much.
Apparently. All right.
They keep pushing them around. Sooner or later, there's going to be bloodshed.
Okay, I see what you're talking about. Well, I think the issue here is they finally got far enough that the Philistines quit following them. And it says, and this is the last part of verse 22, for he said, at last the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Now, there were already Canaanites living throughout this land. But he finally finds a spot where it's previously uninhabited except for them, and that was down in the area around Beersheba. And even then, what did Beersheba mean? Beer was the word for what? A well. What's that?
Another well.
Another well. All right, then he went up from there to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared to him the same night and said, I'm the God of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. You know, they must have spent an awful lot of time digging wells. By this point, you figure there's a well all over the place.
You ever watch the movie Kingdom of Heaven?
Don't think I have.
In the storyline, this young blacksmith ends up going to the Holy Land and becoming a fighter there, and becomes a lord, and gets bequeathed a castle, right? And has the land around it, and he's got all his staff and all of his servants, all his people digging holes everywhere. They must dig like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of holes all over the place until they finally find water. And he turns that what was a destitute area of the land that he owns into this paradise. But they had to dig like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of holes to find one that actually, sourced the water.
Well, from a theological perspective, consider this. Everywhere Isaac has gone, they've had to dig a new well or unstop a previous well in order to find water. Now, fast forward about 2,000 years after this, and what do we find about wells with regard to the Jews? And I can't help but wonder if that's the whole purpose of this story. What Jesus tell the Samaritan woman?
Oh, that's right, yeah. Draw living water.
Yeah. That if you knew who it was that you were talking to, you'd ask me for water.
Yeah.
Well, notice at this point, Isaac keeps moving around. God basically told him, don't go to Egypt, stay in this area. He keeps getting pushed back. But everywhere Isaac goes, he's digging his own well and trying to get his own water. And what did Jesus have to say about that? Come, I'm the source of the water.
You'll never thirst again.
Yeah. But up until this point, we see Isaac and his men digging their own wells and constantly looking for water. And no matter where they go, they're having to dig a new well. And there's, of course, while they're in Philistine territory, there's arguments over who the water belongs to. But finally, when he does settle down, God appears to him. And just like his father Abraham, when he wakes up, what's the first thing that he does?
Builds an altar.
Builds an altar. They're around near Beersheba and worships God. Notice it says he pitches his tent there. Again, what does living out of a tent tell us about Isaac's method of living at this point?
Nomadic.
He's still a nomad. He has yet to plant any roots. Still living out of a tent. And once he pitches his tent there, once again, his servants dig a new well. And then in verse 26, now, instead of him going into the territory of the Philistines, Abimelech comes to him. It says, then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with his advisor Ahuzeth and Phicol, the commander of his army. By the way, that was the same name of the commander of the army during the time of Abraham. So either this guy is really old or
It's a title.
it's another title. Phicol is not his name. It's possibly the title of the, whatever title they gave the commanding general of the army. I tend to go with that because otherwise this guy would have been ancient by this point.
They didn't use junior back then, huh? Could have been
Yeah,
son. Fecal junior.
I guess so. And one thing I can tell you from experience that when you're in a military commander, that's a young man's job. And when you figure that being a commander of a military in that day and age, extremely physical occupation. You didn't have rifles and weaponry of that sort. How did you fight a war back then? Spears, swords, arrows,
Shields.
rocks, whatever you could come up with. definitely not an old man's game, which is why I believe this is not the same guy that Abraham encountered, but rather that the name Fecal or Fical, however we're going to pronounce it, is probably the title of this guy.
They didn't have a practice back then of naming their children after themselves. That would have been too confusing. Fecal, son of fecal.
Yeah, sometimes, but yeah, not that often. Verse 27, and Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you? So when they show up, and now in Isaac's territory, he doesn't exactly greet them with open arms. He sees them coming and meets them, and basically it's like, what are you doing here? Seeing as how, you don't like me to begin with, what are you doing now in my backyard? What does this tell you about Isaac as far, not only does he probably not have a whole lot of love lost for them, but he's wondering, what are you people up to? Why have you followed me here? I left your territory and now you're in my backyard. Isaac's suspicious, and probably justifiably so. And they said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we said, let there now be an oath between us, even between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord. Well, about half of what Abimelech said was true. Is he the blessed of the Lord? Yes.
Absolutely.
And they recognized that. But had they done nothing but good to him?
Nope.
Oh, we treated you very well. No, that's kind of like, well, we didn't attack you or anything, but
Yeah, stopping up all the wells, that's treating me really good.
stopping up all the wells, having the people, basically doing everything possible to run us off. This is kind of tongue-in-cheek that I'm sure by this point, Isaac's probably rolling his eyes and thinking, yeah, right. Like, if you'd have treated us well, I'd have still been 20 miles back farther to the west, but here we are back in central Canaan because you didn't treat us all that well. Now, we don't have any record that Isaac confronted him with this, but you have to figure that that's probably what's going through Isaac's mind at this point.
Nobody did the politic thing.
What's that?
He made a feast for him.
Yep, he did. So verse 30 says, then he made them a feast, and they ate and drank. So he at least realizes that they're now in his backyard. And by the way, whether the person is your worst enemy or not, they can be your best friend, worst enemy, does not matter. If he's invited them into his home, it was a custom that dates back, 3,000 years or more, that even if they were the worst of enemies, they would not allow any, adverse action to occur. Nothing would happen to them as long as they're in the man's household. I mean, that was just their law of hospitality. If you came to a man with a white flag, so to speak, at least while he's in your household, you treated him with hospitality, no matter who he was. And Isaac is respecting this custom. They have come to him, approached his tent, and so Isaac basically has a feast cooked for them. He offers them hospitality regardless of why they may or may not be there. By the way, there's a psalm about that. Anybody know which one it is? Lord prepares me a table in the presence of mine enemies.
23rd.
Yep, 23rd Psalm. That's based on the Middle Eastern law of hospitality, if you can call it that. Verse 31, and in the morning they arose early and exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. So, how would they have exchanged oaths?
Hand under the thigh.
No, not in this case. They probably would have slaughtered a couple of more
Cut 'em in half
animals.
and walk between them.
They would have cut a couple of animals apart, walked between them, and did what they referred to as cutting a covenant. And literally, that's what they did. You took a sacrificial animal, cut him in half, because it symbolized that if whichever one of us breaks this oath, what we did to the animal, we will now do to you.
Sounds kind of mafia-ish.
Well,
They offer you no kind
it
of
could
review.
be, but that's just one of the customs that developed back then.
Safe in the other person's house too.
What's that?
Being safe in someone else's house is just
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's probably what they did, and they probably had some good eats the following morning as well. But what's important here is as they leave, even if they had been enemies previously, they apparently departed, at least peaceably. So now it came about on the same day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the wells which they had dug, and said to him, "We found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba to this day.
that's considered Jacob's well.
No, this is Isaac.
I mean,
Jacob's
No.
way up in Samaria.
Okay,
Yeah, and that comes
later.
several years
Okay,
later.
I know why I'm thinking.
Yeah, we're way down south.
Now, that is the end of this particular little
Yeah, these last few
Story.
verses don't seem like they fit in this story.
We'll go over them briefly, but we're going to have to come back to these last two verses later. But just to kind of end it here at the end of the chapter, I'll throw this in here with a quick explanation of what this is about. Verses 34 and 35 says, "When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah." Now, up until this point, everybody in the family has been expected to go back to the distant relatives up north to find their mates. Esau, who is the outcast son, he's Isaac's favorite, but not the chosen son.
And a wild ass of a man.
And yes, if you want to, well, it's interesting that we're told later that he actually married the daughter of Ishmael. But at this point, just says he married a couple of Hittite girls, which would have been locals, that they would have been family-wise forbidden to be marrying in. This just sets up the part of the conflict that's going to happen. The only reason we have this at this particular point is Moses inserts this just to let you know, as we are introduced to the rest of the story of Jacob and Esau, Esau is the bad boy. Jacob is, while he may be the younger of the two twins, it's Esau who's the bad boy in the bunch. And actually, and one of the reasons I said we'll come back to this later is later, about 3 or 4 chapters from now, we're going to be introduced to a couple of ladies that Esau marries, and it's not the same list as this one. So either these women had multiple names, which again is not that uncommon. How many of us, have got 2 or 3 names besides, the one we go by? I've got a middle name that I don't go by. Except these two. They didn't. And you.
I adopted them all.
What's that?
I've had a lot of.
Well, not counting the ones that people give you, but I mean, even in our culture, most people, you've got 2, not counting your family name, you got 2 names on your birth certificate. Well, back then they had 2, 3, 4 names, and sometimes used a different name depending on the occasion and who they were communicating with. Royalty especially would have 3, 4, 5 different names depending upon, what the situation was. And we still see that today when somebody ascends to becomes a new pope, what's the first thing they do?
Get a new
Change
name.
his
They get a new name. So anyway, we're going to see a list of Esau's wives later that doesn't match this one, and we'll tackle that situation then. So questions this evening?
Is he just an unrepentant polygamist?
Well, that's a possibility too. Sure. Mario?
It seems to me that I remember back, that